All right, seniors. So we're going to look at Harrison Bergeron. I think we read this already in 10th grade when I was just looking for things to read. But if not, if I did, it's okay. We can rediscuss it. If not, well, welcome to one of my favorite short stories. I like Kurt Vonnegut. I know some of you have read some of his work. I think he's an interesting writer. I think he's a tough writer in the way he writes. I think that sometimes there's a lot of depth that's hidden in his work that may seem like it's not as deep as people make it sound. This story, though, man, there's some stuff here for sure. It's not a very long one. We're on page 881 in your book, and it goes until page 886 and just the very top of it. So I'm not going to read it to you. You can read just fine. In fact, we really don't even need to discuss it. You guys can get most of the stuff on your own. But I just want to hit some of the high points and discuss some of the things that I thought you should be aware of for, just for our class. And remember, our topics for this chapter are conformity and rebellion. So we're going to look here at those two, and they both show up in this. I mean, they usually do. They're opposites. But when we look at conformity here, we see a world that's built around conformity as we start. They say the year was 2081 and everybody was finally equal. Look at that right away. That's conformity. Everyone's the same. They weren't only equal before God and the law, which is what that's supposed to mean, by the way. And when we say all are created equal, what we mean here is that we all should have the same treatment. That before God and before the law, whether you're a billionaire or whether you're a homeless person, you should be treated the same. And I would like to throw it in front of the not just the law and with God, but the way we should treat each other. To be honest with you, we don't do that, but we should. But they take it a step further and do what they're not intending, which I think in some ways we've tried to do too. He says they were equal in every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. Now that seems weird. There's the sci-fi element. How do you possibly do that? Well, they're going to talk about the ways they basically, because here's the thing with equality. For equality to work, you're not taking an average. Okay, we're not looking at everyone's ACT scores. We're going to add them all up and we're going to divide them by how many people, and that's going to be our point of equality. That's not what it means. You have to take the lowest score, the lowest score of the person who's trying their hardest. So let's say that. Let's say there's 100 people that all take the test and they try as hard as they possibly can, and whatever the lowest score is, we have to bring everyone else down to that because that's the extent of their ability. So equality like that means really lowering everyone to the lowest possible, or the lowest common denominator, let's say. And so that's what's happened in this country, and they've done it they've added a ton of amendments. Like they said, the 211th, 212th, and 213th amendments. Wow, that's a ton of amendments. I mean, they've changed the law so many times to get these people equal, and they have a new position called the handicapper general, which their job is basically to find the smartest people and find a way to handicap them so they can't be as smart. To take the most beautiful people and make them uglier so that the people who aren't as pretty don't feel bad. And that's really what the point in their society is let's not make people feel bad about themselves, which that's not the way this should work, to be honest with you guys. That's not a good thing, all right? I mean, it's good that people don't feel bad about themselves, but the fact is we don't need to feel bad about that person's stronger or better looking than me. I mean, we need to focus on our own strengths. And then if it's something that can be fixed and you're unhappy with it, fix it. If you're like me and you're a big old fat guy and you don't like it and you think that so-and-so looks better at the beach, then lose some weight. I mean, I know it's not that simple. I've been trying. But, I kind of been trying. But that's kind of what we're dealing with here. Is we don't do it by making everyone fat so I feel better about myself. That's not the right way to handle it. Okay? But that's conformity. All right? Then we have our first major character here, George and Hazel. They're the parents of the titular character here, Harrison Bergeron. So we have Hazel and George Bergeron, who are just your typical family, sitting at home watching TV. But we see that there's some weird things about the interaction between this family. We like the dad, George, is smarter than the average person, so he has this thing in his ear that's supposed to cause it where he can't hear. Doesn't think. Every few seconds a different noise comes through and it breaks his train of thought and makes it really hard to concentrate, which that sounds awful, by the way. Hazel, on the other hand, is perfectly normal. She has no handicaps. George also, because he's stronger, because he's a man, I'm not trying to make that a feminist, or I'm sorry, sexist comment, but in general, at least within his family, he's stronger than his wife. So he also has to wear this big weight around him that helps him to, be tired more so that she can be even with him. let's see. And you'll also notice that, when Hazel is normal, but the fact is that she can't hold a regular conversation. She forgets what she's talking about 2 seconds in. I don't mean like I'm doing right now. I mean, she does it constantly, all right? So they can't even have a good conversation. Again, you have to lower your ability to the lowest possible, like lowest common denominator, all right? She makes a comment about telling him that he should lay down and take the bag off for a little bit. That she says, and we're at the top of 883 here. She says, "I don't care if you're not equal to me for a while." The fact is, she shouldn't care at all. This is her husband. She shouldn't be in competition with him. But just those sentences, it feels like she's being sweet, but it's really kind of a sinister comment on their society. Going on, it's still Hazel. She says, "If you could just take a few out when you come home from work," talking about the weights. She says, "I mean, you don't compete with anybody around here. You just sit around." But and then listen to what he says. He says, "If I tried to get away with it," said George, "the other people would get away with it, and pretty soon we'd be right back in the dark ages again with everybody competing against everybody else." He sees that as the dark ages. Guys, competition's not bad, and this isn't one of those there should be no trophies for losers speeches. We're just saying that there should, if you're part of what makes like artists, writers, musicians, something. What drives them is you see what someone else is doing, and you're like, "Man, I wish I could do that. I wonder if I can." And they push themselves to improve. I mean, we have to have those standards to judge against, so we can better ourselves. Otherwise, we just become lazy, worthless slugs, which we're doing a great job of becoming, by the way. So it's not that competition's a bad thing. Now, hyper competitive, where you make people you try to crush people, is not always a good thing. But there's nothing wrong with keeping score in a basketball game, even when kids are in elementary school. Learning to win and lose are parts of life, all right? If you don't like the way losing feels, and who does, go out and work harder so that you don't have to go through it again. I mean, that's a good skill. Same thing like for going to get a job. You don't like getting rejected, make your resume better. Go do something to help you, become a more viable candidate. I mean, these are things we need, all right? So listen to what she says down here. They're talking about, the news bulletin that interrupts. The guy doing the news bulletin. You think about today, our news anchors, people have really good voices and very good, they're very poised, things like that. No matter what station they're on, they have they're good about this. But the one here has to be made. We don't want the people at home to feel like, "I wish I had a better voice." So they have a guy that's got a speech impediment. He struggles. He's obviously very nervous, and that's who they have. And listen to what the wife says. She says, "That's all right," Hazel said to the announcer. "He tried. That's the big thing. He tried to do the best he could with what God gave him. He should get a nice raise for trying so hard." All right. That's a problematic statement. All right. The idea that, you should get a raise for trying so hard. You still have to accomplish the task. All right. Just be honest with you guys. Effort's great, but it's just like in school. You can put all the effort in. You can go home and study. You can do everything you want. You still have to pass the test. You still have to make whatever grades you want on the test. You could have worked for 6 hours and still fail the test. Your work, the trying hard, isn't what necessitates the grade. It's what you do in that moment. So, effort's good. We need effort. We're never going to achieve our best without effort, but you don't get across the finish line because you really wanted to. You have to walk across it or run across it. All right? Okay, at this point, an alert comes up. Let's get back to the story and stop with my proselytizing here. We get back to the story, and the alert that's come up is about a person who is a threat to the society. It's George and Hazel's son, Harrison, who, man, isn't he is something when we see him, okay? They say he is a genius and an athlete, is under-handicapped, and should be regarded as extremely dangerous. Okay, at that point, they put the picture of Harrison up and they put it in upside down and have to flip it and they mess around. Because, again, these people are complete idiots at that point. They talk about Harrison's a special case. No one has ever had the number of handicaps he's had. They've had to create new ones because he is such a specimen. By the way, he's really young. I think they said he's 14. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me, but I think he's 14. All right. They talk about like scrap metal being hung over him to try to slow him down. He's got these glasses that are like scratched so he can't see. He's got like this rubber nose on there to make him look stupid. I mean, he's got everything possible. I mean, because he's been gifted with everything, and so he's got all this stuff, and that they've had to limit him. All right. Eventually, he busts in. And here's one of the things that's always bothered me about this. You'd like to make him a sympathetic figure. He busts in, and he's begging for people to not be like this, and for them to take pride in their differences and pride in their strengths. But instead, he busts in. He says, "I am the emperor," cried Harrison. "Do you hear? I am the emperor. Everybody must do what I say at once." He stamped his foot, and the studio shook. I think this is why we make him young. It's because he's still got that petulant, childlike attitude. He says, "Even as I stand here," he bellowed, "crippled, hobbled, sickened, I am a greater ruler than any man who ever lived. Now watch me become what I can become." Now here's the scary thing. The fact that he's been held back has made him so angry. Now he's going to become something that is scary. Listen to how he's talking right there. So it talks about him tearing off all of his handicaps. He also takes the mask off of there were some dancers there that were masked up so they could look ugly, and he picks one of them as his queen. And they start this really weird, this is a very Vonnegut section where they start a dance. And it even comes to the fact where he at 14 to have all he has, he's already defying physics, or defying, nature, genetics maybe. But he defies physics here too, because they're jumping him and the girl until they actually levitate almost and can almost kiss the ceiling. And this is like the high point of the story. This is your climax. As they go up and up and up until they literally are about to kiss the ceiling. And you see how special they are and how amazing they are. And even though none of the rest of us can do that, there's still something powerful about it. At that point, the handicapper general, a lady who's got a terrible name, Diana Moon Glampers, what a horrible name, she comes in and she just shotguns him down. He's dead. The girl's dead. She tells everybody to put their handicaps back on, and everybody get back to what they were doing before. This is a typical dystopian fiction. I mean, it ends badly. Everybody doesn't all of a sudden decide, hey, these handicaps that we force on each other are terrible. We should get rid of them and all stop worrying about this. They go right back to where they were before. And in fact, to stress that, we go back to the parents who just watched their son get killed on live air. And look at this. It says, George comes back with a beer, paused while a handicap signal shook him up, and then he sat down. "You been crying?" he said to Hazel. "Yep," she said. "What about?" he said. "I forgot," she said. "Something real sad on television." It's been minutes, and she's already forgotten watching her son get killed on live television. All right? Because, again, we have to lower everyone to as low as they can go. "Forget sad things," said George. "I always do," said Hazel. And then that's kind of how the story ends. Pretty scary, right? I mean, the fact that, a society that's so obsessed with people being equal, that's where they end up. In a position where, people who have great abilities, their abilities are taken from them. And that's where we get to this conformity versus rebellion. Sometimes rebellion doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to overthrow the government, okay? Sometimes it can be something as simple as I'm not going to live the way society has deemed that I should live. It's great when, people rebel against the norm in art. People have always written poetry a certain way until we have people like the Imagist poets like Ezra Pound come around there and say, no, we're going to do it different. And he writes stuff that people today are still baffled by. But, I mean, it's amazing because it was rebellion against, I'm not going to do the same thing. Could Pound have written, sonnets like Shakespeare? Sure, I have no doubt he could have. But the rebellion against that and saying, I'm going to do my own thing, is something that's awesome. And it's something that's very human, very American for sure. It's very human in general. Conformity, we talked about whether conformity or rebellion, which one, do you feel like you might lean more towards? And it's not that either of them is bad. It's great to conform when it's important, and that this is what you need to do what you would like to do. I mean, as a teacher, I have to conform and do certain things that I don't really like. I'd like to wear jeans and whatever I want to wear every day, but conforming to the dress code is important because it's part of what makes my role instead of me looking like I'm a really old student, and that's fine. I conform in the fact that, I wish we didn't have to be here from 8 o'clock, or for me, it's 6:30 until 3. I'd like to come in and work from, 10 to 5 would work better for me. I would prefer that, but, I'm going to conform and do what I'm asked to because otherwise I don't have a job. So conformity is not a bad thing necessarily in those instances. Those don't matter. That's just preferences. But rebellion against something that, first of all, if it's wrong, rebellion is the way, if that's the only option left over. And again, it doesn't have to be violent. You don't have to understand rebellion doesn't mean violence. It just means doing things differently and not giving in. And that's what kind of we we see if we don't do that, this is the world that we're going to have. And we definitely don't want to live in this world. I don't, for sure. So, although I'm a pretty ugly dude, so maybe that part wouldn't bother me. But, man, I fancy myself as kind of an intelligent person, and I don't want to wear glasses with scratches or an ear thing that screams in my ear. And by the way, they describe several of the sounds that they hear throughout here, and they're not pleasant. So, definitely don't want that. Imagine that, once a week you get the fingernails down the chalkboard sound, and how terrible that would be. So definitely don't want to live in a world like that. So hey, conform where it's necessary, and where you feel the need to be different and do things your own way, do that too. All right. Be proud of the gifts God has given you, and work hard to accentuate those, and make those. I mean, God gave them to you for a reason, so build around them. All right. Okay, enough of my speeching here. Let's go ahead and stop. We're right at 16 minutes nearly, so great way to stop. And I will see you guys back later this week. So I'm excited about that. I've missed you guys. So all right, have a good one.